Pride/Prejudice by Anne Herendeen, Chapter 1, Segment 1. "It is a truth universally acknowledged," Fitz said, "that a single man in possession of a good fortune is in want of a wife." Charles blinked and sat up. "Lord Fitz, it's the middle of the night. What do you expect me to make of that? Sounds like another of your epigrams." "I suppose it is," Fitz said, "but its meaning does not seem particularly obscure. You and Caroline going to tie the knot at last? You sly dog!" Fitz grimaced and pulled Charles back down beside him. "My dear," he said, "you have a tendency to levity that, like any disproportion, can be tedious in excess. And you," Charles said, "have a way of talking to people as if you were a judge and they the prisoner in the dock." "Guilty as charged," Fitz said, bestowing a kiss on the pouting lips. "My great-uncle might have been pleased at my following his example. Now, what shall my penalty be? I know." He trailed his hand down Charles's slender body until he found what he was searching for, held tight and squeezed. Charles groaned and arched his back. "God, Fitz, you're a devil. I wish you'd—" "Don't talk," Fitz said. He moved lower in the bed, opened his mouth, and paid his forfeit with an alacrity bordering dangerously on enthusiasm. He would consider it deplorable if he were not motivated by love of the purest kind. They woke to dawn light. "I'm only leasing the place," Charles said, picking up the argument as if there had been no interruption. "I haven't committed to anything permanent. A few months' tenancy, a year at most." "The minute you take possession of the house," Fitz said, still groggy from sleep, "nay, the minute you ride into the village, you will be besieged by every fortune-hunting mamma and her brood of hideous, squinting, gap-toothed, caterwauling daughters." "How do you know they will be hideous?" Charles asked. "Or are all women hideous, if you think I might find them agreeable?" "In a way, yes," Fitz said, attempting a lightness of tone he could never feel on this subject. "You are modest in your assessment of your own charms, and too easily flattered by the pitiful arts of any barely respectable female." "My word," Charles said, "you have a low opinion of my understanding. For someone who calls himself my friend—" Fitz saw he had wounded, where he had hoped merely to inspire wariness. "My dear," he said, kissing the cheek that presented itself as he approached the lips, and stroking the soft brown hair, "I don't question your intellect, merely your judgment, and only on this subject, one that has proven difficult for the wisest philosophers to master back to antiquity, much less an English gentleman of 22. "Whereas from the vast experience of 27 all is revealed," Charles said. 28 last month," Fitz said. "It is not my age, but my temperament that gives me an advantage. I do not immediately assume, because a woman simpers and plies her fan, that she is in love with me, or I with her." "At last the truth comes out," Charles said. "You don't like women. I've suspected it all along." "Really?" Fitz said. "In other words, because I show some taste and discrimination, I'm supposed not to care for women in general?" Fitz's voice had entered that supercilious register that ordinarily would have led Charles to concede the debate. This time he persevered. "When have you ever looked at a woman but to find fault? As far as marriage is concerned, my fundament is as close to a wife as you'll ever come." "Don't be coarse, Charles," Fitz said. "If you believe that's all you are to me, your understanding is worse than I thought." "Deny it all you like," Charles said, "but I begin to pity Caroline." "And what, may I ask, has your sister to do with this conversation?" "I am not to be coarse," Charles said, "but you are allowed to be dense. We've talked it over 100 times. You're to marry Caroline, and I'm to marry Georgiana. Double brothers-in-law." He shrank back, seeing the truly alarming expression distorting the features of his friend's handsome face. "Do not," Fitz said. "I repeat, do not bring my sister's name into this bed." "Why not?" Charles said. "You think she's too good for me? I notice you don't scruple to pollute yourself." Fitz caught himself on the verge of losing his temper, and took several deep breaths. Why was it that this subject always upset him, when he knew it was inevitable? "I'm sorry, Charles," he said. "You see, Georgiana is just turned 16. With the difference in our ages, and especially since our father died, I am more of a parent to her than a brother." Charles laid his hand on his friend's muscular chest. "I understand, Fitz. I'm sorry, too. I just think you're making too much of this business. You know my father wanted to purchase an estate, but died before he could accomplish it. It's the least I can do to follow through on his intentions. You may sneer, from your lofty perch atop the greatest property in Derbyshire, which, you may recall, you inherited. But I, like Lackland, must start from nothing, although I hope I'll do better than King John." "You could do a lot worse than the Magna Carta," Fitz said. Charles laughed dutifully. "I'm not rushing into anything. Surely you agree I'm behaving with all the circumspection and prudence you could require." "My dear boy," Fitz said, "I agree that you think you are. You can't help it, that you fell in love with the first house you saw with sufficient rooms, just as you fall in love with every woman who possesses all her teeth and whose hair retains its natural color." He rolled over on Charles, pinning him to the mattress with his larger, heavier form, and kissed him until he gasped for air. "Brute," Charles said when he was allowed to breathe. "Overbearing, domineering, brute." He licked his lips, moving his tongue in a slow circling motion. "Kiss me again, brute." "If you're going to tease me like that," Fitz said, "I shall be obliged to do more than kiss you." Charles said. "I was hoping you'd say that. Just try to take it easy. I want to ride over and look at the place today." "I will be as gentle with you," Fitz said, "as with a woman." "Lord help me," Charles said. "I'm a goner. I won't be able to sit for a week." And yet, a few hours later, as Charles Bingley rode through the village of Meryton to the manor house of Netherfield Park, he was permeated with a great sense of well-being. Fitz had allowed him to go alone, and to make all the arrangements without interference. "You are no longer the untried youth of our first acquaintance, but are on your way to becoming a man," he said. "I've known it for some time now. Bear with me if on occasion I find the transformation difficult to accept." "Of course I will," Charles said. "Indeed, I hope, that is, I don't want to give up being your dear boy entirely." The animation that this speech produced in Fitz's austere face and hard body almost led to a repetition of the dawn's activities, until the advancing hour and the possibility of the entrance of servants with shaving water brought things to an abrupt and unsatisfying conclusion. "Tonight," Charles said, "I will tell you all about it, and you can criticize my decisions and inform me as to how much better you would have managed the business." "How disagreeable I must be, to be sure," Fitz said. "I wonder you don't take the first chance to marry and seize your freedom." "I could never be completely free," Charles said. "Just give me credit for some maturity." "Isn't that what this tiresome conversation has established?" Fitz said, but smiling. "Go on, then. Sign the lease on your manor, and invite every female in the neighborhood to a ball. I won't say a word." "I will hold you to that, Fitz," Charles said. He just might, at that. A ball to celebrate the establishment of his own household. And if he met a pleasant, pretty young lady or two, where was the harm in that? He would have to marry sooner or later, however Fitz jibbed at every mention of the subject. In fact, it might be very nice to have a wife. But he would do nothing rash, nothing to make Fitz jealous or unhappy. The man had the devil's own temper, but he was the truest friend, and there was no doubt he had Charles's interests at heart. And he made love like a demon and an angel, both, in one body. Charles sighed and dismounted in front of the house. It was well kept, in good order, in good condition, only recently vacated. He could be happy here. He was sure of it.